Okay, picture this. A totally normal, sun-scorched field in Panama. You know, grass, maybe some cattle roaming around. But what if I told you that right underneath that ordinary ground was a secret cemetery? A dynasty of chiefs literally covered in gold. All right, let's dive into this absolutely incredible story of discovery.
So this image, it really gets right to the heart of the whole mystery at El Caño. On the surface, what you see is a quiet, unassuming pasture. But just a few feet down, archaeologists uncovered a world of power, ritual, and treasure that is completely rewriting the ancient history of the Americas.
So you have to ask, how did this quiet field become the absolute center of such a massive discovery? Well, it's a story about challenging old assumptions and, looking a lot deeper than anyone ever had before.
For the longest time, central Panama was basically seen as just a land bridge, a corridor between the massive empires of the Maya up north and the Andes down south. It wasn't supposed to be a major center of power itself. But this discovery, it changes that entire picture.
A big reason for that old assumption is what we call the Tropical Archaeology Challenge. See, unlike places with giant stone ruins that last forever, here, most of life was built with stuff like wood, fiber, and feathers, things that just vanish over 1,000 years. So when gold survives, it's not just treasure, it's one of the few voices from the past that can still speak loud and clear.
And finding that voice was definitely not some lucky weekend dig. It was years of slow, patient work. The archaeologist Julia Mayo and her team started surveying way back in 2005. By 2010, they'd found the first chief, and the site just kept on giving, revealing more and more, right up to this very day.
So what was the deal with all this gold? I mean, these incredible artifacts weren't just buried because they were valuable. They were designed to send a really, really powerful message.
And what a message it was. We're talking about huge gold chest plates, intricate arm cuffs, and earrings shaped like powerful animals. Think bats and crocodiles. One chief even wore a belt made of hollow gold beads and had over 2,000 tiny gold spheres sewn onto his sash. Yeah, this was not subtle.
It's probably best summed up like this. In a society with no billboards, no written signs to declare who is in charge, the gold did the talking. It was the ultimate way to communicate power.
You really have to imagine it, right? The polished gold catching that harsh tropical sun, just flashing every time a leader moved. And the animal imagery? That wasn't just decoration. It was a visual language of authority, of lineage. This was status you could see and understand from a distance, instantly.
But then, archaeologists found something that completely shifted their entire interpretation of the site. It wasn't the biggest piece of gold they found, but it might have been the most important clue of all.
And it all came down to a question. So the team is finding all this incredible regalia fit for powerful rulers. But what do you do when you find a set that's, well, impossibly small?
The answer was so simple, and yet completely revolutionary. It had to belong to a child.
And the logic was just undeniable. First, they find these teeny tiny gold objects, perfect for a baby, but decked out like a chief. Then, they find gold arm cuffs on the skeleton of a kid, maybe 12 years old. The conclusion was staggering. Status here wasn't something you earned in life. It was inherited right from birth.
What this points to is a hereditary power system. So we're not just looking at a few powerful leaders who popped up here and there. No, we're looking at a dynasty with established families, with rules of succession, and a social structure strong enough to see a child as a future ruler.
And that realization, it totally transforms El Caño from just a collection of rich graves into something so much bigger, a multi-generational cemetery, a stage where power was performed for everyone to see.
Think about this for a second. For 200 years, this one specific place was used as the ceremonial burial ground for the most powerful people in their society. This wasn't some short-lived trend. This was a deeply rooted tradition.
And it wasn't just a one-time thing either. So far, they found 9 of these high-status chambers. That's a pattern, a system. Each burial reinforced the same exact message of power and order, again and again, for generation after generation.
We can even put a name to one of these rulers. A discovery in 2024 unearthed this important lord who was buried around 750 CE. Because he was buried with a set of bone flutes, the team nicknamed him the Lord of the Flutes. Now that sounds like something from a legend, right? But he was a real person, part of this real ceremonial tradition.
And the scale of his burial was just immense. I mean, the Lord of the Flutes wasn't placed in the tomb by himself, not even close. He was at the center of a much larger group, with more than 30 other people arranged around him. This was way, way more than just a funeral.
You're really looking at an event, a piece of ceremonial theater. Imagine flutes playing, bells moving, and all that gold flashing in the sun. The point wasn't private grief. It was a massive public performance of the social order. It was a message to everyone watching, this is how our world works, and this order is going to continue.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together and really see why this quiet little field in Panama is having such a massive impact on how we understand the ancient Americas.
This discovery forces a complete shift in our thinking. The old view saw this region as passive, a simple bridge, but the new view, proven by what we're seeing at El Caño, shows it was an active center of power, generating its own unique culture, its own symbols of rank, and its own dynasties.
This wasn't just a group of simple villages. The evidence points to all the hallmarks of a truly complex society. You needed specialist gold workers to create these objects, ceremonial knowledge passed down through generations, and the ability to organize huge amounts of labor for these burial events. El Caño, together with the nearby site of Sitio Cuente, is revealing a whole cultural world that was basically hiding in plain sight.
And that really brings us to the final thought. The biggest discovery at El Caño wasn't just a piece of gold. It was the realization that an ordinary field was hiding all the clues to a forgotten system of power. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question. What other complex societies, what other hidden histories are still out there, just waiting for us to look a little deeper?